Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington. I can't even remember who I am. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my old pal, Evan Grant. Evan, how are you?
I'm fine, Kevin. Everything's great here. I'm not on vacation. I'm not on a lake or anything, but everything otherwise is great.
Evan said that because I am indeed on vacation. But, to serve the greater good of the Dallas Morning News faithful, I am here to do this podcast because it means so much to me. My family, y'all get back. Y'all all just sit over there and be quiet while I'm doing this podcast because this is more important than y'all. Okay? Actually,
I thought you were going to say it served the greater good when you go on vacation, because that means it's less days that we actually are we're seeing you in the paper.
That would be fewer days, not less days, but go right ahead and speak ungrammatically. That's fine.
Can I just interject that when we're talking about the newspaper, the other day, Bruce Bochy in the dugout in Washington was telling some story. Man, the man has so many stories, but he was telling this story, and it all related to trying to win 2 tickets to the All-Star game in Washington when he was a kid. And he was living in Northern Virginia and delivering papers. And I believe he was delivering the Washington Evening Star because he didn't like getting up in the morning. But at the root of all this was somewhere during that whole monologue by him, he said, "Do they still deliver a newspaper?"
So clearly he's not a print subscriber.
He's all digital. Boach is an all digital man.
Yeah, he is. He is. It's an amazing thing, the number of people that I run into that still get the paper, delivered, thrown up on their driveway. I think that's terrific. Of course, we do. Not a lot of people in my neighborhood do, but can't be just holding it and being surprised by what's in there. I love that part of it, and the lovely wife, she loves that part of it. She loves to read the print product. So more power to her. All right, Evan, let's talk about these Rangers. They have been all over the place in the last few weeks, as they have pretty much all season. Win a few, lose a few more. And the offense is really not shaking itself out of the doldrums, except for Marcus Semien, who all of a sudden is like the best player in baseball. He has done this before when he has shaken himself out of a slump, but not quite to this extent. Surely at some point he's going to cool off a little bit, isn't he?
Well, I mean, I listen, he's not going to hit 500 every week. But I think that there are a couple of things about what's gone on here. One, for me, the thing that stands out is it looks like what Marcus is doing isn't anything new. He's hitting fastballs on the inside half of the plate with authority. I don't know that he's getting a ton more of fastballs on the inner half of the plate, but I do think maybe he simplified his approach and said, let's double down on the things that I've always done well. I've always pulled the ball in the air to left field. And he's taken whatever steps necessary to make sure that that's his primary focus. You talk to different people about different potential adjustments, and everybody says, yeah, maybe. Whether it's like, has he moved up an inch on the plate or something closer to the plate? Has he kind of decelerated or deflated what had become a little bit more of an exaggerated leg kick? There's plenty of theories about that, but the bottom line is, I think when it comes down to everything, we talk about sports psychology and the best route to fixing things being psychology. And I think what it all gets down to is Marcus spent a lot of time saying, who am I? What do I do well? Let's get back to focusing on that. And so I think he had to clear a bunch of stuff out of his head and got back to doing what Marcus does.
Yeah, in your story about that the other day, he made no bones to hide the fact that I don't want to talk about what I was doing before and whatever was going wrong. I'm only concentrating on what's going forward, and that kind of does imply that he was thinking too much, and that maybe he just tried to needed to simplify this as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's at the root of it, and I think in talking with Brett Boone, some that has been part of the whole goal is trying to simplify things for these guys. The worst thing you can do when you get to the tee box or when you come up on your ball, hopefully in the fairway, is think about a bunch of stuff as you're pulling your club back. And I think that's the same thing that the Rangers have been trying to do with their hitters is to say, okay, let's not be thinking as much in the batter's box. Let's know what we want to do and just try and execute it. Now, I think there are some things, Kevin, where it does require a little bit of thinking, but that's more before you get into the batter's box, and that's about like game situations and things like that. And I think this team still struggles with that, as do I think a lot of teams. But I think the idea when you get in the batter's box is, I don't want to be thinking, I want to be reacting.
Yeah, and if all Brett Boone does is get Marcus Semien straightened out, if that's what happened, well then it was all worth it. Frankly, they needed, because he has to hit, and so does Corey Seager. Obviously, when they're the two most expensive players, lineup guys in the lineup, in the regular lineup, those guys have to deliver for you, and then you just hope that other guys like Jonah Heim and Josh Smith and Josh Young get some timely hits every once in a while. But those two guys have to be delivering night in and night out. They have to be the guys that kind of to win it for you more often than not. So, and Corey Seager's kind of in a slump now, and Wyatt Langford's in a slump now, and so it's still going to be a little more difficult. But a couple of those games, Marcus Semien in Washington went on his own.
Well, I think the Rangers scored 17 runs last week, and Semien had 2 home runs. I think he had 6 RBIs and 4 runs scored. So, the Rangers went 2-4 last week. They blew a game in the 9th inning, so they probably should have been 3-3 on the road on that first week of the road trip. But my point is, you really had one hitter that was hot and another in Jake Berger who delivered a little bit of power. And the thing is, if you've got a couple of guys that are hot on this team, it can carry you. But for most of the season, nobody has been hot. There hasn't been one guy who's been in a position who's been hot enough to carry this team.
Yeah, well, Langford was having a good season until recently, and but this goes to show you that even that is not enough, and his power numbers haven't been quite the same either. I mean, but you're right. I mean, that it is amazing when a guy gets hot, like Semien has been, the difference it makes.
Yeah.
And
especially with this team, Kevin, right? Because of the pitching, and we saw that over the weekend. They scored 5 and 4 runs in back-to-back games, won a road series for the first time in over a month. This team does not need a ton of runs to score. They are 23-4 going into the Minnesota series when they score 4 or more runs.
Yeah, that's just a phenomenal statistic, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of stats out there that, and I don't question them. I mean, I think they're all good and they're all fine. But there's nothing more telling than that you're 23-4 in the games where you score 4 or more runs. That just shows you how this is an unprecedented streak by Rangers pitching. There is no other era, in Rangers history, certainly since they moved to Texas, where the starting pitching in particular, has been better than this. It's just phenomenal. And to that point, I was watching something yesterday that I guess it was on ESPN. I'm not sure where it was, but Al Leiter was talking about Jacob deGrom's pitching mechanics, and they had him up on the big screen and they were showing everything he does, and Al was just going on and on about the beautiful synchronicity of his delivery and his ability. He said, so many pitchers when they throw close to 100, like his son Jack, are just happy to come down the mound and be throwing 100 miles an hour, and it goes where it goes, and that's all well and good. But this is a guy, he said, who throws that and the glove doesn't move, And that is the thing that separates him not only from his peers today, for the most part. There are a couple of guys like that, but in history.
Yeah, I mean he's a freak, and I've seen a couple of stories about, well, he's not throwing 101 anymore. And listen, you don't need to throw 101. That was all vanity. His stuff is so pure at 98, 99. He doesn't need to throw 101. So I don't even understand why that's been a story in any regard. I do think I heard some talk over the weekend that maybe there's been a little bit of a change in his arm angle, that it's dropped just a little bit as he's aged. I don't know. What I do know is this, that when he's on the mound, he is effectively playing catch. Yes, he generates incredible velocity, but his body and his mechanics are so pure that it looks like he's just playing catch. And more importantly, Kevin, when he is attempting to deliver a pitch, his whole idea is just hit the glove. He knows where he wants the catcher's glove to be, and he knows that he's going to try and hit it. And to this point, on Saturday, Saturday in Washington, his slider was as good as it's been all year. And his slider has been good all year. It's just not been to Jacob's level of perfectionism. But when it's to that level, he's basically unhittable, which I think is what we saw in his 2-hit effort on Saturday. And so if that's the case, and he's able to get that slider down, he's just going to become that much more invincible as the season progresses.
The way that I have viewed deGrom since he has been here after he got hurt initially in that first season was that, he's a great luxury to have, but you just can't count on him. If he's going to pitch, then that's great, but you just go into the season thinking that he's not going to be a factor. You can't count on that, him being a factor, just because of his unavailability. But let's go ahead and give ourselves that. Let's go ahead and say that, okay, he will be available now going forward. He looks like this is the longest stretch he's been available at what, 4 years?
At least.
Yeah. So, what could this guy do? I mean, as Al was saying, he said he's never pitched better than this right now. He said he thinks that he's just as good now as he was when he won the Cy Young, the last time he won the Cy Young. So what does that mean for the Rangers if he's going to pitch like that?
Yeah, I mean, it means they have a genuine Cy Young candidate, which is something they've never won in their history. I don't think that he's gonna, he's not gonna get to 250 strikeouts. I don't even know if he'll get to 200 strikeouts. And I still think there's going to be some marshaling or some governance over his innings. He's at 76 and 13 starts. Look, Kevin, since 2019, the most starts he had made in a season is 15 in 2021. So yeah, he's been more reliable than he's been, and he's working harder than he has for a while. And so I think that, like you're seeing right now, the Rangers are trying to build in some extra days of rest for guys. And I don't rule out the possibility that at some point in time, whether it's right around the All-Star break or right afterwards, the Rangers try and get him a good extended 10 or 12-day rest. But at 22, 23 starts even, this guy is, if he performs this way, he's a Cy Young candidate. There's some really good Cy Young candidates in the American League. Tarek Skubal is obviously one of them, and he was as good as I've seen when he faced the Rangers in May. But yeah, Jacob is at 36 years old. He is in that conversation.
Well, and that's what, and not only obviously because of him, but Tyler Mahle pitching well.
I take that back. He's 37. He turns 37 this week. So
is that right?
He's still in that conversation. Yeah.
Well, let me first say on that, he is 37, but there's not a lot of mileage on those tires for a 37-year-old pitcher, and that makes it a little bit different. The problem for him has not been that he's wearing out so much, I think, as it is that It's just things that happen to all pitchers at some point. They can be 22 as opposed to 37. So that kind of, to me, the age is not as big a factor for me with him as it would be for a lot of pitchers at 37. Let's say Justin Verlander, although he was still great at 37, or Max Scherzer or somebody like that, who are both still very effective. And I don't have their numbers right here in front of me, but I'm assuming that by the time they were all 37 years old, they had thrown a lot more innings than.
For sure.
And well, because of all that, let's bring that all back to this, what the Rangers situation is. If he's going to pitch that well, and Nate Eovaldi's going to continue to pitch that well once he comes back, and then if Tyler Mahle's going to pitch this well, this is all the reasons why the Rangers can't be counted out at this point. Because if Marcus Semien is making this comeback now, you know that Corey Seager eventually will return to himself, and so will Wyatt Langford. That there's reason to believe that they could still get this thing turned around in the West. But I still think they're going to have to add a bat, don't you? And probably, do they need to? I mean, what is the priority to you? Would it be a bat or would it be a closer?
It'd be a reliever for me. I still think that, if and when you get Jock Peterson, you're now looking at 12 guys for 9 spots in the lineup. I think that the club's biggest need is going to still be somebody real reliable to close out games. I think the last couple of weeks with Chris Martin has shown that as good as Chris is and can be when he's on the mound, there is some question about how often he'll be able to go. I don't think the Rangers are going to use him on back-to-back days for a while. They're certainly not going to use him on 3 straight days. And they're going to be a little bit protective of him. So for me, the idea would be that this offense is going to get better. If they're going to contend, this offense is going to have to get better. And so if they are in the idea or in the picture of contending, I'm going to assume at that point that the offense has performed somewhat better by then. And so I think the most glaring need will be a high leverage reliever.
Yeah. Are there an assortment of high leverage relievers that would be available?
There's, I will only say this, that if you're looking to finish off a roster at the trade deadline, getting a high leverage reliever is the market in which you would like to be. That's the most obtainable market.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it typically is. And one of the reasons why the Rangers never have invested in relievers going into a season, knowing that we can always go out and get that if we have to.
Yeah. Okay. So I just think that, to your point, right, I'm still not 100% sure how the Astros are off to the start that they are, other than they're the Astros, and at this point they are what amounts to a dynasty. And even though they've got some new faces in their lineup, there's a certain level of expectation within that organization that they're going to perform. But I don't know that I think the Astros are the best team. And look, Seattle's supposed to have a great rotation. They've had some injuries in the rotation. They've gotten unreal production from Cal Raleigh. And my point is, if the Rangers hitters aren't going to stay that cold all year, I can't imagine that Cal Raleigh is going to, hit 60 home runs and OPS over 1,000 for the remainder of the year. So I think you're going to see the Mariners offense cool off a little bit too. And it is there to stumble around and everything. It's there for the Rangers to pounce on. The opportunity is there. They just need to play consistent baseball, and they haven't done that yet. They hadn't won consecutive games, Kevin, in 3 weeks until Saturday and Sunday. So I don't want to say anything is a trend or anything like that. They're going to have to show it longer and better for it to be a trend. But I will say this, that the last 10 days of Marcus Semien certainly are encouraging that this offense can start to, one by one, pick things up.
I will say this about Cal Raleigh. He could hit 66 home runs as is projected by his current pace if he played the Rangers every day. He kills the Rangers. Why is there's always somebody with the Mariners who just kills the Rangers? It was like Corey's brother Kyle was just such a Ranger killer when he was there. It just seems like
Well, I
there's
think
always a Mariner doing that.
I'd never want to take one of your arguments and deflate it, but I think usually it's somebody in the AL West that kills the Rangers. Whether it was Garrett Anderson or Tim Salmon or Mike Trout or who was the catcher that killed them for several years with the Shea Langoliers now is the catcher that owns
Shea
the Rangers.
he's the guy now. Yeah, he's the Rangers killer now.
But yeah, I mean, you play those teams 12 times a year, and so there's more familiarity. You're going to see them more. There's more chance that those guys are going to actually do some damage. But yeah, Raleigh is having a great year. I just don't know if this is a guy who's going to end up doing what he's done all season long.
Yeah. Somebody's got to do something here. We talked about, before we get out of this Rangers segment, let me just ask you about the outfield situation. So now Alejandro Osuna is kind of cooled off a little bit, which was unfortunate, but that's what happens with youngsters. I think it's hilarious, this whole Roman Anthony thing in Boston and all the hype for the number one prospect in all of baseball to come up and then, boom, fizzle. I mean, I felt sorry for the kid from the standpoint is that how can you possibly live up to this? You got people standing and applauding and you're just walking to the plate. I mean, how ludicrous is that situation?
Again, the whole idea of prospect stock oftentimes just befuddles me because they are young players, and the idea that you're going to get some guy who changes the franchise for the long term is, once in a decade. And it's magical to watch. It's magical to watch when you watch what Evan Carter did in 2023, but it's just, guys are going to go through struggles. They're going to go through up and downs. And the only thing that's different here is, look, I think that on the projector scale, right, Roman Anthony and Marcelo Meyer and Christian Campbell, those were all guys who were in the top 10 in all of Baseball America's prospects. Osuna is not a guy who's ever been a high prospect, just a guy who continues to get better. And I think that he's gone through a rough stretch, but I also believe that this is a kid who isn't really fazed by that stuff and probably does go down in the not too distant future. And when he does, I think he will come back better for it.
Yeah. Well, at this point, they need to be playing Sam Haggerty, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to play Sam Haggerty for a while now until he's not hot, but he's doing all the things that you want from designated pesky guy.
Ooh, designated pesky guy. Okay, I like it. All right, that's going to do it for the Rangers segment of our podcast. We're going to move over here and talk a little bit about the Mavericks and all this speculation that Jason Kidd might want to leave the Mavericks to coach the Knicks, which I'll have to say, apparently there is some smoke to that rumor, or some fire to that smoke, I guess I should say. And the question is, for me, how much of it with Jason Kidd would be, I'm just trying to send a message to my boss, Nico Harrison, that I didn't like the fact that you left me hanging out there to deal with all the blowback on the Luka Doncic trade while you're sitting in your office or wherever you are, and I'm having to deal with this night after night. Or maybe it's an A and B, and the B would be, this is a nice little leverage thing for me here to make a little more money. I'm going in, I'm still got a contract, but I might like to get a little bump out of all this. I have a hard time believing that Jason Kidd would want to go back to New York, where he ended as a player and was his personal life became fodder for the tabloids there as his marriage was unraveling. And also, he's not exactly a ball of fire with the media now. I just can't imagine that. I know that when the Knicks are playing well, that they may be the story in sports in New York. When they're really going well.
No,
Although
they're not. When they're going well, they're only the story at the end of the Giants or Jets season or before the Yankees get hot. Let's face facts there.
I think that's probably true. I do think that there is an undercurrent there, though, of I mean, it's New York is basketball. I mean, that's when people think of New York. I think of New York basketball, the streets of New York, playing that, Rucker Park and all that kind of stuff. That stuff is a very real thing, but that can't be worth putting up with all the rest of it. I mean, because even if you look at the situation that the Knicks made the final, or got to the and got there, or got to the conference finals before they blew up, was the fact that that's not good enough in New York. And even if you win the conference finals, which is certainly, the East is far more winnable than the West is, you still got to win it all. In New York, no one's going to be happy that you made the finals. You still got to win it all. And from that standpoint, when the Mavericks are when everyone's available, when they're fully healthy, I think they're a better team than the Knicks are. I wouldn't see why he would want to move on, but it's an interesting situation from the standpoint of what he wants from the Mavericks, and would Nico Harrison give the Knicks permission to talk to him? Obviously, if he does give them permission, that tells you a lot about what his expectations were, and if he is as, I don't know if I want to say cutthroat or cold-blooded as he's seen by making the Luka Doncic trade. Would he feel the same way about Jason Kidd?
Yeah, how to say this? I would say that Jason Kidd lost me once and for all with the answer on the Luka Doncic trade and his return with the Babe Ruth comparison, because I thought he was just being cute and condescending. If he goes to New York, I don't think that it's a terrible, terrible loss for the Dallas Mavericks. I don't know why you would want to go to New York except for the idea of being the head coach of that franchise in that city and the ego feel that it creates. But he's about to have the number one draft pick and a supposedly a generational player in Cooper Flagg. He doesn't have to deal with quite the level of second guessing or the mercurialness of Knicks fans in New York or here, I should say. So I don't know where it would make a whole lot of sense for Jason Kidd. But I also I'm not going to sit here and think. My opinion of Jason Kidd is that he's a nice coach. I don't know that he's not replaceable.
Oh, I don't think he's irreplaceable. He's better than what Mavericks fans think. They don't like. It's the drive-by coaching style is what they'll refer to with him, as he just kind of lets them play. I think what you have to remember here, and it's hard to sort it out, as to the fact that it's not a coincidence that Kyrie Irving, after all his troubled history and of basically forcing his way out of at least two stops along the way, that he's been so happy here. It's not because the fans clap for him. That's not what it is. I don't know how much of it is Nico Harrison. I don't know how much of it is Jason Kidd. I don't know how much of it is the combination of the two that has made him happy. But you can't oversell that point, because when he's happy and when he's healthy, he's really good, and he's worth everything that they gave up for him, certainly, and they need him. Without him going forward, even bringing Cooper Flagg in, they got to have the firepower he brings, and that's a legitimate question about how good he'll be once he comes back from this injury, because his talent is predicated so much on his quickness and speed. And when you have an injury like that, then that's a problematic thing going forward. But and also you certainly got the same thing with Anthony Davis. who is a guy that was very close with Kidd. So both of those players have a very tight bond with Jason, and also they have a pretty tight bond with Nico. So I'm not saying that they would want to leave if Jason was to leave. I don't think they would, but they would certainly want to know what kind of head coach that Nico would bring in. But as I was talking to our old pal Brad Townsend before the podcast and before we started taping that today, there would be a lot of people lining up for the job. I'm telling you that. And you start with a guy like Mike Malone, who is the other candidate to leave the or to coach the Knicks. Jason and Mike Malone are probably the 1 and 1A in some point. Two very different kinds of coaches. Mike Malone, much more of a tough guy, a little harder edged. That would be interesting to see how that went over with this group of Mavericks, especially the veterans. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but it'd be interesting to see what that would be like in that situation. So it is an interesting conundrum. My guess is that he is just Jason is just doing this, and Jason is the one doing it. And that's how this is getting out. This information is just I'm just sending a little shot across the bow here, and I wouldn't mind a bump in my salary because if I'm him, I would much rather be in Dallas, and that's not just speaking as a homer. It's just that you've got some really good talent here. Not only in veterans, this Mavericks roster is with the addition of Cooper Flagg is really all of a sudden a much different thing than what it was before they won the lottery. Before they won the lottery, it was a win now, kind of tilted the better half of the roster tilted obviously towards guys in their mid 30s. Now, if Flagg ends up being who everybody thinks he's going to be, well, you've got the future of the franchise right here, for at least the next 9 years, unless Nico does something really stupid. So it is an interesting situation for the Mavericks going forward at this point. And when you combine it all with the fact that Flagg is coming to town with his family, right? And he's going to be here now, and now there's all this talk about, well, who is the who's the head coach going to be? Is it going to be Jason Kidd or not? This is not exactly a great bit of timing for Nico in this situation, but we'll see what he's able to do with it. It's it has been one of the most confounding stretches for any franchise in this market that I can think of. The up or the down, and then of course up, of losing Luka Doncic and then gaining Cooper Flagg only a couple months later. That is fairly remarkable. I can't think of any time in the 40 years that I've been in this market when something like that has happened to a franchise, to that kind of swing. So we'll see what that does for them going forward. All right, that's going to do it for the Maverick segment of our podcast. We're going to move over now and talk about the House settlement, which finally was approved by a federal judge, meaning that any NCAA Division I school that wants to pay its players directly can spend up to $20.5 million to do so, which is a lot of money. This is the first time, obviously, a groundbreaking development in college sports. We've had athletes making money, obviously, through NIL and making a lot of money. So we've got a softball player at Texas Tech making over $1 million a year. Who would have thought that? But what is happening now is that the schools can directly pay their athletes, which has never happened officially before. It's happened unofficially, but it's never happened officially before. We've already gotten an email blast, an announcement, a statement from Texas Tech saying that they're all in on this and they're going to hit the limit of $20.5 million, and they're going to raise $14 million of that a year through their fundraising efforts. So as the school is not going to incur, what would be a burdensome duty to pay these athletes. And I
But
guess
that,
this is
Kevin,
all part of
that's
the
in
situation.
addition to collective
Yeah,
money?
the collectives are just a completely that's a collectives are all booster driven. So those are not that money's not coming from the schools. You're allowed to have that was part of the whole
Right.
NIL thing, right? Was paying that before. Listen, this is going to be extremely complicated because now what you're going to see is that there's going to be a push from athletes. They're not stopping here. There's going to be a push from athletes to be recognized as employees, and so therefore they're going to end up with basically unions. And so obviously what the NCAA is going to try to do is say that no, these are not employees. We are not going to be responsible for that because we can't afford to pay for all of that. So it's like, so you're going to pay these people, but they're not employees, you know. So how is that going to work? This is going to continue to be a mess for the NCAA for years to come. And I'm not saying that that it's a bad thing that athletes are being compensated financially. I know there's a lot of people out there who feel like it's enough for them to get their college these scholarships and whatever. And I will say from that standpoint, they're worth a lot more money now than they used to be. If you're sending your kids to college now, you know how much it costs, 30, 40, 50, $60,000 a year to send your kids to college. Just outrageous, the cost now. And I'm very glad that all four of ours have graduated and they're all paid for already. And we weren't paying those kind of sums for that either. So it is worth a lot more, but that's just the cost of play, these days. And if you want to win, this is what you're going to have to do. It is remarkable what people are willing to do now, considering what it used to be. It used to be so difficult to get boosters to pay for things. Even back in the old days, that they just didn't want to do it. SMU was paying back in the 80s. They were always willing to do it. Their boosters were. And that's one of the reasons why they are where they are now. They've already kind of jumped themselves. They put themselves in the ACC and made a big run in the CFP. So this will be interesting to me to see what Texas Tech does. They're going to be a big hitter in this thing because Cody Campbell, one of their big boosters and a former football player at Tech, he has put them front and center in this debate. They've been one of the leaders in the portal and adding players, and there is a definable difference now in Texas Tech and what they want to be. Now, of course, you have also the issue of from people who are going to argue that, okay, but where's all this money going to go? Well, it's going to go mostly to football and men's basketball. That's where it's going to go. So what kind of issues is this going to cause with Title IX? It's just one thing after another in all of this. And I think as someone pointed out, I was reading, they said this is not the end of anything with the House settlement. This is just the beginning. And I think that's exactly what it is. We're kind of seeing it's like the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and they had that big embryo
But
up there in space. This is it.
Kevin, I mean, if there's anything we've learned from college sports over the last, well, I mean, I've only been around it for 40 years. And I think you predate even that. But if there's anything we've learned, it's like there is never an end, right? I mean, the college football national championship has been an ongoing and continuing to develop situation. NIL was a continuing to develop situation. Yeah, I mean, right now the main avenue to explore for athletes and for everybody else and for a competitive advantage is financially. And so, I think there's, and I think you've said this on a couple of occasions, and I'd like to believe this, that, hey, if only the NCAA had been reasonable years ago and said, yes, college athletes deserve a stipend, some share of the pot, a reasonable stipend for their contributions, then maybe we wouldn't have all of this. And the older I get and the more jaded I guess I get, I feel like No, that wouldn't be the case. I think we were always going to head for, with as much money as there is involved in this, that the players were going to want and that athletes were going to want, and that, quite frankly, colleges that want the money and the prestige and the revenue that comes with a top flight program competitively, we're going to keep pushing that envelope or that envelope further down the table, and that's where we're at now. And yeah, I don't know what the next portal or the next passage is going to be, but we're definitely not done.
Well, when I said that about it wouldn't have been this bad if they had let the players have a piece of the pie sooner. Yeah, I didn't mean that it would never come to this. I mean it would just have delayed it. It would have, as I've said before, anytime the longer you oppress somebody, and I know people don't want to hear that, but you are oppressing these college athletes. I mean, come on, so many of them, developed later on, especially football players.
I
All kinds
wouldn't
of
say
problems.
you were oppressing them. I
No,
would say you were
you're
exploiting them.
well, you're exploiting them, but you're kind of oppressing them when you're saying no, you can't have this and you can't have that, and you can't have this and you can't have that. That's kind of that's oppression in my mind. But when you don't give them the ability to have access to health insurance later in their career, when they are suffering from things that happen to them as college football players later in their lives,
That element for sure.
that's terrible. And
For
that
sure.
and they just didn't want to do that. They didn't want to be responsible for it. They wanted to be, oh, you got to prove to me that this stuff didn't happen. It's like, there was a case that I worked with, and she made a settlement after the death of her husband. He had played at he grew up in Denton, and played on those. He was a defensive lineman in those Texas teams that the big shootout in that era, and he eventually developed dementia in his early 50s and died of it in his early 60s. And he never played a down of pro football. That's what happened to him in college football. And they did the CTE scan of his brain, and he had terrible brain damage from that, the CTE.
Right. But
So
why didn't the colleges want to? Why did college athletic departments and colleges in general not want to give them insurance?
well, because they want to pay for it.
They wanted the money themselves.
Right, absolutely, and look, and that was my issue with colleges in general, was that, look, you can go to any college anywhere and see the difference. Because I covered colleges on a regular basis in the 80s, so a large portion of the 80s, and those athletic facilities at those places hadn't changed much over the previous, I don't know, 20 or 30 years. They all looked at like they had for decades, and they were run the same way. They had small staffs, and it just, it was kind of a mom and pop kind of deal. Even at the big universities, they were like that. And then when they finally started getting somewhere with all that stuff, and then there was more money coming in, and next thing you know, you're seeing these facilities are just all over the place, and they're expanding exponentially, and the money that's being spent, and then the money that's being spent on the coaches and on the administration staffs, and how they were growing these staffs, and all of a sudden you've got all these advisors on board, and all these many things. So you can't tell me that we're going to do all of that and not give the players anything. That was
They were.
ridiculous to say.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. And so that's why I don't have any sympathy whatsoever with the colleges for any of that argument that, oh my gosh, now all you hear is, oh, we don't have any money. I was talking to somebody the other day who has a lot of contact with college coaches and across the landscape, and he was saying how they're all just scared to death that they're not going to have enough money to pay for everything. And of course, a lot of these schools aren't going to have it. Some of them will, and we know pretty much who the ones who will, and those are the ones, they're in the Power Four conferences. They're going to have enough money to pay for all this kind of stuff. And the smaller schools, the smaller conferences aren't going to be able to do it. But frankly, they're not going to be competing year in and year out for national titles anyway. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, I'm not saying all this is any good. I don't like it. I don't like seeing what's happening. It's just the way that it is.
Why don't you like it, Kevin? What do you not like about it?
It's just a mess. It's from my standpoint as a reporter, one of the things I liked about covering college sports was that basically we're just covering the games. We're just covering the games and the personalities. I don't have to deal with contracts, stories. I don't have to deal with, is this guy going to hold out? Is that guy going to hold out? What is the labor issue going to be now? And you had all of those. You've covered baseball your whole career, and when you have all of those issues going on all of the time, and it's just stuff I'm not interested in writing about. And so for me personally, that's the mess that I don't like. It is all of this kind of thing that has entered into the conversation now that takes away from the sheer joy of covering college football and the color and the just the pomp and circumstance of all of it. Now it becomes something completely different. And in some ways it was that. I mean, we did have to cover all that kind of stuff. Not that kind of stuff, but all the off stuff. When I was in the 80s, it was a big deal covering the Southwest Conference when everybody was in NCAA trouble, and you're going from one school to the next trying to figure out what's happened here, who turned in who to the NCAA.
Right. Well, now you don't have the violations to deal with, right? Everything was about the violations at that point in time.
Oh,
now
yeah,
it's not violations, but it's the transfer portal. It's NIL deals. It's this, it's that.
Yeah,
it's all a big business. I don't like it. I don't particularly like it either. I don't like the whole idea of for me, college football is the one time a year I feel like I really get to be a fan. And it's like, Donnie Ecker was a big college football guy, and he constantly asked me about, what do you think about this guy that Georgia's got in the transfer portal? Or what do you think about that guy that Georgia's got? And I'm like, Donnie, I'm just going to tell you, when football season starts up and they put on pads and they start playing games, I am completely into it for the length of that season. But recruiting and the portal and that stuff, I'm not that interested in it. I am interested in the history, the pageantry, and the excitement of the games of college football. But all the other elements, I'm just not that interested in.
Look, I don't like recruiting. When people would ask me sometimes about recruiting, well, who's getting this guy and who's getting that guy? It's like, I don't know. And I don't care. They're 18-year-old kids. Come on. They're making up their minds about where they're going to go. And it's a big decision for them. But for the most part, for all of them, it's a win-win kind of situation. If they go to one school or another, it may not work out, but it's still going to be pretty good for them, whatever it is. And now when you mix in the portal with that,
you're recruiting a guy for 1 year in a lot of cases.
Well, you are. And now what I was hearing from this guy I was talking to is that you're having to pay people monthly to keep them committed. Now think about that. Pay them monthly just to keep them committed to the school. So that is, all of that just seems like, ugh. This is not why we got into this, is for all this kind of stuff to be happening. So from that,
but at the same time,
good.
At the same time, right? You go, just like you and I talked about a ton last year, you go to see Texas, you go to see football games, and the sport and the quality remains great and exciting, entertaining, engaging. It's all the other stuff that I just have zero interest in, to be perfectly honest.
Well, me too. And that's what I said. Just like you said, I think you put it perfectly. From August until January, it's great. I love all that part of it. I don't love all the rest of it, and that's going to have to be enough for people to get them through all of this. I'm glad I'm not having to be the one pouring out the money, as I was told by somebody at Texas A&M. There, a booster was being asked about contributing to the collectives, and at that time A&M had that number one recruiting class, and so there was a lot of noise about all of that, and it didn't pan out very well, especially not for the head coach. And so anyway, what the booster said, he goes, I can either donate money to this school that I love and have my name put on a building, or I can donate money and have a guy smoking pot at halftime, in the locker room, which is what the story was. So that's Yeah, that's pretty telling. That's how I would feel too. The sustainability of all this will be very interesting to me to see who's going to want to put up this kind of money year after year after year after year. It's an awful lot of money, and you can get people to do it for a while. Most of these billionaires, and there's a lot more of them than there used to be, but most of them didn't get where they are by being real magnanimous with their money. They don't like to watch their money burn. So obviously, what it's going to lead to is that coaches are already on short leashes as it is. They'll be on even shorter leashes, and so will the athletic directors. It's creating a much more difficult market and life for them. But that's just the way it's going to be, and we're all going to adjust to it. I will say, as you just mentioned, we did talk about that all last year about how much fun that season was. I don't remember a college football season as fun as that one. The playoffs were kind of a mixed bag, and we got a little bit of everything in that. But for everybody who wants to complain about the playoffs hurting the season, the playoffs didn't hurt the season at all. You can complain about how the playoffs, turned out if you want to, but you cannot complain about the quality of the playoffs and the entertainment value of that. So
it was a great season.
Yeah, it was. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We appreciate you taking the time to listen, and we hope you'll be back next week, and we will have plenty more to talk about then. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you the next time.